Very good day to everyone, and welcome to this online policy briefing on the Sustainable Products Initiative. What novelties does it bring? Organized by the European Policy Center and supported by the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra. My name is Stefan. I'm an EPC Policy Analyst, and I will be moderating this event. So today we will discuss a Sustainable Products Initiative, which was launched on the 30th of March by the European Commission. Very much awaited initiative, one of the most important, if not the most important promise made under the circular economy strategy from 2020, with an aim to help contribute to the European Green Deal, to achieve Green Deal ambitions. And arguably it will have an important impact on our economy and society as a whole in the EU as well as beyond. So today we will discuss the basic features of the SPI and the implications of its adoption and implementation. And I'm happy to have Florika Fink-Hooijer, Director General for Environment from the European Commission, as our main speaker for today. And Florika, thank you for joining us. And we'll be happy to hear, an overview of the SPI, and then we can continue the discussion. Afterwards, we will hear from our respondents, and then we will have a Q&A. And I would just like to encourage the participants to already write their questions as soon as they can, so that we can take as many questions as possible by the end of the event. So without any further ado, Florika, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan, for having me, and also for the colleagues to have hopefully a very good discussion about something which is still very new. A lot of people have still to digest it, but it is a game changer. It's what you just said, because it is basically the expression of a very transformative tool to green industrial policy. It's a green industrial policy proposal. And as such, what it is aiming at, and that's the most easiest to understand, is to make every product in the future sustainable. So everything that enters is put on the internal market should be having the sustainability as a norm. But now this is sounding very great and grand, and it is, but it's a lot of complexity, legal complexity, and a lot of work that still awaits us is coming, because this is a framework proposal. It's a legislation addressing the product design, which actually is very key, because it determines for 80% what features a product will have, so as to make it sustainable. But let me just say a few words also on the current context, because I think in the now geopolitical changed situation, the concept of circularity as such is much better understood, and therefore probably also more followed. Needless to say that industry is standing very much behind, but also the ecologists, the environmentalists, they're all behind. Why? Because indeed COVID has showed us already that we have these supply chain problems. But now with the war in Ukraine, we also have become, even the grand public, more aware of the dependency that we have on specific raw materials or commodities. And this is why the Sustainable Product Initiative, and actually we call it now Eco-Design for Sustainable Products, is so important, because we want to have a product that lasts longer, but is recyclable. But it's not just about recyclability. It's a very new concept, basically. And it is important because we look at energy efficiency, because we base ourselves initially on this Eco-Design Directive, which was very instrumental to bring down a lot the energy consumption through energy efficiency. But today we need more. We need carbon footprinting and environmental footprinting to go down, because the material uptake, that what we put into the production process, into a product, is not infinitive. So we really need to put that down. And it is important because you will know, some might know, that actually we have modelings that we use. And the modeling shows that if we were to apply this framework, this rule on products in the future, these products are around, what did we have here? 65% of all product related emissions could be curbed. and 70% of our resource depletion. And that's enormous. Resource depletion can be curbed by 70%. That is enormous. And that's why what we are looking at is, as I said, this framework where we say a product has to correspond in the future to certain product requirements. And these requirements are principles of sustainability, things like durability, repairability, upgradability, but also you can remanufacture a product afterwards. You can reuse it differently. All of these concepts are actually extremely important. And let me explain one example when we talk about repairability. You cannot have repairability if it is not designed from the start to be repairable. And I think we all know about electronics that are designed not to last. I'm sorry to say, they are designed not to last. So you cannot repair them. You have to throw them away afterwards. And only when you design it for repairability, you can then, for instance, in this new legislation, ask for holding spare parts available, but then also the consumer at the end would get a right to repair. So it all links. But here we look at the production process. And if we want to make sustainability the norm, we have to really look at all the different features and implement that along the entire life cycle of a product. So from the design, but also when we have end of life, when we would dispose it. And that is where it is coming in. How does it work? I mean, when I said we have this very broad scope, the life cycle approach, the circularity approach, which now I think is a bit better understood, we basically would go on two requirements or several requirements. One is really what we call now the eco-design requirements, but as I said, it's no longer the classic eco-design on going down on energy consumption, but really also on carbon and environmental footprinting. So you ask in that framework that in future all products have to correspond to certain performance requirements. Performance requirements means that the manufacturer has to make sure that, for instance, a product lasts longer, breaks down less, is easier to repair. These are the performance requirements that correspond to these six or several principles of sustainability. As I said, upgradability, reusability, things like that. And it's not, I have to really focus on that, it's not just recyclability. It is much more, because it's also repurposing a product. Recyclable is basically a form and potentially even the last form of use. We want to basically have other sustainable forms before. Apart from the performance requirements, we also put out information requirements. With information requirements which then link to, for instance, recyclable content, or are there substances concerned in a product, or how many of them are in the product? What are the environmental impacts? So how much water, how much material you use? All of this you would have to inform, and these are, the producer has to put this and take this into account. So performance requirements, information requirements. And then you have labeling. Labeling, you all know it from the energy, the eco design directive. You have this, when you buy a fridge, you know what is energy intense or not. In the future, we would also want to have not only energy efficiency scores, but also resource efficiency scores. And also things like that can lead then to other parts like repairability scores, but or an index for that. So different label requirements. In order to read all of that, so what is in the product? How can the product be used throughout its life cycle? You also need what we now call, and it's a very, very innovative feature, what we call a digital product passport. And that will become also mandatory, as will be the performance or the information requirements. Now, this digital passport means you tag a product to a, you can tag the product with a barcode basically, which identifies and link these sustainability data to that product. Why is it important? Because on the one hand, a consumer can take informed decisions and make choices, but it's very important also for business to business, or because if you want to have a product afterwards to be reused, remanufactured, or recycled, you need to know what is in. Think about substances of concern, which in some products might still continue to exist. Then for the safety of the worker who will break down this product from the recycling, you need to know what is in. So this digital passport, product passport, is a very new concept that we are developing together with DG Connect. I perhaps have to say, as a side remark, this is a co-created legislative framework with DG Grow, with environment, of course, energy, others, and many others, GSC. It's really important to look at the different features, because even though it is driven from a sustainability and therefore an environmental perspective, in the end, as I said, it's green industrial policy, but it also means we use the internal market legal base as our foundation, because you want to create a level playing field for that. Then you will have, apart from the what I would call the requirements on the product in the information requirements, you also have specific concerns that we wanted to address. And one everybody knows about is the destruction of unsold goods. Now, this depends, of course, what type of goods we are talking about, but it is quite annoying that we know, and we see it every day, especially with after COVID, we had a lot of online shopping going up, and a lot of things were destroyed, not because they were failing, but they just were, I mean, it was too complicated to perhaps put them back into the market because they had a little default, or they were not the right size for the person who had ordered it. So this is something which is of great concern for everybody. And you think about the objective is to reduce the material uptake, to reduce the resource depletion. So then you cannot afford that. What we are now doing in this framework legislation, we say in the first instance, we set out information requirements. That means the producer will have to disclose the number of products discarded, and I say deliberately discarded, per year. The reason for discarding, but also you can say the amounts of the discarded products that are used for reuse or repurposing, remanufacturing, recycling, for energy recovery, so as waste, whatever, you know. But you as a producer will be made responsible to make these informations public on either a public website or in different means. Now, in a second stage, and I said it's a framework legislation, in the second stage, when we go for specific legislation, product legislation, then we might come even to a ban for specific products that should not be, let's say, destructed. And then you have, of course, usual requirements like green public procurement, which I think goes almost without saying in current times, but it is an incentive also for member state sides, state incentives, in order to go into that sustainable production form. When I said it is a framework, it means that we will then look, and we're already looking at types or categories of products that have this high potential for circularity, but they are also very intense in either energy uptake or resource uptake. So if you put these two together, you will know that you can look at certain categories to go for what I would say lex specialis. However, in order to do so, we will obviously now have to set up a work plan. What are these sectors? But also, do they really have a potential for environmental improvement, depletion? I mean, halting the depletion of resources. And we will go in a lot of public consultations, the impact assessments, also look at self-regulatory measures, how to support SMEs. All of this in the work plan for the next steps will have to come. But to explain you, I mean, the sectors that we are looking at is very much household textiles, but also steel, aluminium, electronics a lot. And I know we have somebody from electronics here. But if you allow, just as a last explanation, I would like to say, how would we apply it, for instance, for the textile sector? Why do I say the textile sector? Because with the package, we also proposed a textile strategy, and it is very illustrative for the gains that we could make by going into a sustainable production form. And in fact, textiles is really one of the sectors, the fourth sector actually, which has the highest pressure on the resources, on land and water use, but also have negative impacts, of course, on energy consumption, but also on, and therefore, on climate change, but also on nature because of pollution and things like that. Now, we know that we will probably have a trend of up to 63% more consumption in textiles in the EU by 2030. And at the same time, we know that we only have approximately 1% of textiles worldwide that are recycled. So that gives you a figure of what is the potential. And therefore, in the strategy, and that will be then worked out in specific legislation, we were saying we have to make sure that the textiles that enter the internal market will have to be more long-lived, more recyclable, made to a large extent, at least, of recyclable fibers. We have to avoid also microplastic pollution. It should be free from hazardous substances, things like that. And of course, you have social rights that have to be looked at. And then, okay, you come back to the right of repair. So it just shows you that in one area, you can do a lot by going for product-specific performance requirements, but also by going into, let's say, potentially reductions on performance requirements on the substances you use, on the fibers, as I said. You have the extended producer responsibilities, again, to increase in durability, upgradability, recyclability, things like that. And here, textile will be one of the sectors where we look in first, and it will concern probably really these household products, which are having a very high impact, but also very great potential for improvement. And this is these personal household textiles, but also mattresses, carpets, you know, what you put on furniture, and all of this. Some of these features we can already address under existing legislation, like the Waste Framework Directive, or we have put last November forward a waste shipment regulation proposal. All this makes it coherent because you will also no longer then ship out the waste, textile waste. I stop here because I think this gave you a glimpse, and I'm quite sure that with the discussion that we will have, more questions come up, and as far as possible, I will try to already respond, but it is also a progress in making. So I stop here.
Thank you so much for this overview, Florika, and indeed very, very interesting, very exciting initiative. And indeed, as you said, this is in a way, it's a framework, so additional proposals and legislation will follow, but it is good that there is already this proposal in place to set the scope for further action. And indeed, what you said is it's really something new. I mean, it builds on the backbone is the eco-design framework, but then it goes beyond energy efficiency, and also it includes products other than electronics, such as for potentially, I mean, as you mentioned, could extend to products such as textiles, furniture, and so forth. And the performance standards, information standards, and also the inclusion of the requirements of the digital product passports is also quite interesting, and something, of course, that we have in the EPC we have been working on this in the last several years, and it's very interesting to see how now this also is something that is becoming, let's say, part of the policy framework, and interesting to see how this will develop. Yeah, we already received a number of more specific questions. We will also be happy to hear from our respondents. Just one thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned indeed that deco-design will have a strong impact on let's say, on the environmental impact, climate impact of products. It affects all stages of the life cycle, and it will help reduce resource depletion. And that's arguably something that's even more important now in the light of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I also wanted to ask if you have any, say, brief general reflections on how you consider, let's say, the impacts on the competitiveness and also on the just transition efforts, because, yeah, indeed, how this relates to, let's say, this overall goal of competitiveness, and also arguably, if the products are more durable, people may ask, maybe the price will go up, but then they will last longer. So then it's a long-term versus short-term. But if you have any reflections already, like how these were considered when the SPI was launched, that could be helpful. And of course, any other reflections you will have on the considerations of the Russian invasion on Ukraine, how this in a way was reflected in the proposal as such, if you have anything to add on top of what you said.
Okay, I will be very brief, because the whole idea of the concept of circularity means you go away from a linear growth. You want to go on a different type of growth, where you decouple actually really the economic development from natural resources use. I mean, this is the starting point. And if we know that we have to go to reduction of material dependencies, and that brings us also to Russian invasion, and that brings us also to how to foster a EU open strategic autonomy or resilience for certain materials, I think then it is obvious that this proposal will certainly not weaken our own sorry, there's something ringing, our own competitiveness. I think overall we have seen that if I am a producer, of course I have investments in the beginning, and this is why the industry asks us always, and they're very fully supportive of the circular approach, for predictability, which we are now giving with this proposal, legislative predictability, in order to de-risk their investments, right? At the same time, once I go on the sustainable path, I'm less dependent from supply chains, I'm less dependent from price fluctuation, and I can make savings in reusing or reducing some of the energy, water, other materials. And then comes back the issue of also how do we then recycle and create indeed a secondary raw material market. And that's again why we put everything on the internal market. So I think industry and also investment have seen the sort of what the gains in it, and there's nothing against it. It's good. So it helps in the industry, but it does help also the environment and the climate change, because we do have planetary boundaries and everybody starts to understand it. We cannot deplete it. So if you go on a sustainable path, you might ultimately stay long in business and also ensure, as I said, a certain autonomy, independence, and also a certain growth, but it's again not a linear growth.
Thank you very much. Helpful just to set the entire scene, and before we then go into other, let's say, continue the discussion. So thank you, Florika, and I would then be happy to hear from our first respondent, Mari Pantsar, Director of Sustainability Solutions, Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra. Very happy to have you here, and happy to hear your reactions to what we heard so far, and any other reflections on the SPI from your side.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And thank you, Ms. Fink-Hooijer, for your excellent intervention. And also, of course, thank you for the excellent work that you have been doing at the Commission related to Circular Economy Package #1. So in the beginning of my reflection, I would like to share with you a couple of words about Sitra, because I'm not sure if all of our participants know what kind of organization we are. So Sitra is an independent future house, and we were established by the Finnish Parliament about 50 years ago. And actually, we are a combination of a fund and a think, do, and connect tank. And we have a very strong international focus on climate and nature actions, and also on the circular economy. So in the field of circular economy, we have been working for quite some time. And for example, during the last 5 years, we have developed education materials and courses together with all levels of education in Finland and the EU. And we have also built different kind of tools for businesses to move forward, because we believe, at least in Finland, that businesses really see the circular economy as a very important tool to increase their competitiveness. And then we have also created a global community around the World Circular Economy Forum, the WCEF. And I must say that I really want to congratulate the European Commission for the publication of this package, and especially for the long-awaited initiative on sustainable products to mainstream sustainability in the EU. And now we see that the steps that the Commission and also all of us in the member states are taking are still early steps, and they are decisive for the path we are on. The design phase, as already mentioned, is of key importance, as 80% of most products' environmental impact is determined at the design phase. And it is very important that this approach set by the Commission should be followed by planning new eco-design requirements for different product groups. Then it is also clear that the circular economy is really needed to achieve the EU's 2050 climate neutrality target, and also to halt biodiversity loss. So we at Sitra often say that the circular economy on its own does not solve the climate crisis nor the biodiversity crisis, but without the circular economy, for example, the targets of the Paris Agreement cannot be achieved. And then also, to turn the tide on biodiversity loss, we need to tackle the root causes, which are, for example, the unsustainable production and consumption models, which are based on linear economy. And for example, according to a study in 2018 by Material Economics and Sitra, the emission reduction potential in 4 commonly used materials, such as steel, cement, aluminium, and plastic, is significant. It is as much as 296 million tons of carbon dioxide per year in the EU by 2050. And that is 56% of the total emissions of the EU's heavy industry annually. So without strong action, emissions from the global production of basic materials alone risk exceeding the available carbon budget. Then also some words about the brutal war that Russia initiated in Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. Of course, the situation is very frightening, especially for us in Finland, but it has also shown how fragile our linear economy is and how dependent we really are on imported raw materials. The war has made it very clear that the green transition is needed now more than ever, so that we can get rid of the fossil fuels imported from Russia. And at the same time, the need for critical raw materials increases further. And for this reason also, the circular economy needs to be enhanced. It should include recovery and reuse of critical raw materials. And we should see circular economy very much as a security of supply tool also. And what we have noticed that in Finland is that the businesses need tools and concrete examples of circular business models. So the Commission's plan to prepare guidance on boosting circular business models is highly welcomed by Sitra, and the European-wide efforts to boost the uptake of circular business models in companies is essential, since circular business models haven't yet been mainstream. For example, according to a survey in Finland, the majority of technology companies considered the circular economy as significant or even revolutionary business opportunity. And together with these industries, Sitra have created circular economy playbooks that concretely help businesses in the circular economy transition. Last, I would like to share with you some views about leading the global transition and the role of the EU trade policy and standard setting. So EU has a great opportunity and should really leverage both the single market and trade policy to support circular economy across global value chains. So we have already seen evidence of this so-called Brussels effect, that in certain areas global companies end up complying with EU regulation even outside of the EU. And the EU's new product policy will require new standards and labeling also. And the sooner we engage in international cooperation to ensure strong, globally recognized and endorsed standards, the better. So I would like to end by thanking the Commission once again for these much needed initiatives. And we really look forward to working together with you to keep the ambition level high. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pantsar, for your reflections on the matter. And I would like to now give the floor to Louise Bünemann, Chair of Environmental Sustainability Working Group Orgalim and Head of the EU Environmental Policy at the Confederation of Danish Industries. Louise, happy to have you here, and please, happy to hear your reactions to what we heard so far.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and thank to Mrs. Fink-Hooijer for an interesting introduction to the SPI, or we will need to know the new abbreviation to use. But I very much agree with you that this is and has the potential to be a game changer, and also that industry welcomes this. We really see this as a way of a win-win for both industry, economics, but also for the environment. And the Orgalim industries, the technology industries of Europe, we have extensive experience with the current Eco-Design Directive. And it does have significant also circular elements, for example, the availability of spare parts, etc. And our experience with this directive is very good. We believe it's a well-working instrument, and we applaud you for using it further. And what the part of the, if I should mention one thing that we really appreciate about the directive and this method of obtaining more sustainable products, it's the proportionality principle of doing thorough analysis of, like you explained in your intervention, looking at where is the potential and what will the cost be, and these must be proportional. And we think that's a very good approach to the whole ambitious target of having sustainability be the norm in Europe. It's a very good place to start. I'm also very glad that you mentioned the internal market as part of this. Of course, sustainability and the environment is very important, but to us also the competitiveness and the functioning of the single market is really the key to a well-functioning circular economy. And we have seen and been concerned about certain countries, I won't name names here, but certain countries doing their own national legislation on circular aspects. And while it's commendable that some countries want to force ahead and be more circular, it's also really a hindrance for the single market. So it's very good that Commission is now moving forward and presenting this initiative and hopefully strengthening the internal market in the process. Finally, I will mention we are talking about novelties today, and to us, especially the new digital product passport is a real novelty, and we definitely see potential in it. For example, the ability of companies to know more about have the use data of products, knowing and being able to improve products and making them longer lasting that way. And it really has both a business potential and a circularity potential. At the same time, though, we do have some worries about what information will be public and what not. And well, bottom line for us is it's important that the information requirements you set really do make an environmental difference. We don't need another database. We need something that really makes a difference and is workable for companies. I would hope that you go to this with the ambition of actually making perhaps an administrative relief for companies for this. It's very assuring for us to hear how you work together internally in the Commission. And we hope that you will also be continuing that good work and making sure that the different information requirements from different parts of the Commission are aligned and perhaps even streamlined and making it easier for companies. And of course, we will be very happy to give our inputs and work with you to make this this proposal work in real life. I think that will be it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, for your reflections. I would then like to give the floor to Barbara Rietbroek, Councillor for Climate Action and Environment, Permanent Representation of the Netherlands to the EU. Barbara, also happy to have you here and happy to hear your views on this topic.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I hope you can hear me well. And I'm really happy to share some points, the point of view of the Netherlands here in my response on this important piece of framework legislation. And indeed, we agree with DG Fink-Hooijer that this is indeed a game changer. So one caveat beforehand, of course, the proposal just came out, so we're still studying it. And the remarks I'll be making are preliminary remarks from our part. And I'm just highlighting some of the elements we find important. So, well, let me be clear about the fact that we really welcome the circular economy package as published last week, the whole of it. And we really value highly an ambitious follow-up of the Circular Economy Action Plan. So including concrete legislative proposals such as this one that we're discussing today. The reasons for that, we find it important that in the fight against climate change, this is a really important cornerstone. It will be lowering CO2 emissions. It will help us in the fight against biodiversity loss because, as we know, globally, half of all greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of biodiversity loss are caused by extracting and processing primary raw materials. So a proposal as such would definitely help. Then also, of course, the zero pollution ambition will be supported by it. And also a proposal like this one would have a positive effect on reducing resource and energy dependence that the EU may have, for example, resources and energy coming from Russia. That are some first remarks I would like to make. Then, of course, let me get to the SPI, which is crucial in the transition to a circular economy. The Netherlands, if I may say so myself, has been a front runner in the circular economy challenge ahead of us. And the last 10 years, actually, we have been advocating for broadening as well as deepening the current eco-design directive. So we are happy that a proposal is out there and that such elements are indeed considered. So we also welcome the fact that an increasing group of products will in the upcoming years be covered by the legislation. And we support the fact that the future eco-design regulation will not focus only on energy efficiency, but will also include sustainability and information requirements. So we really hope also that in the process leading up to the implementation of the proposal, Member states will be involved. And for example, when we are identifying the product groups that will be taken into account. And yeah, we believe strongly that textiles, but that was also already, I think, highlighted by DG Fink-Hooijer, should be identified as one. In that respect, so we welcome requirements for recycled content. And in our view, this will stimulate the market for secondary raw materials, which is a very good aspect, we think. And also, not only we would like to focus on recycled content, but also go for a balanced approach where we also decrease the use of and how we tackle hazardous substances will be carefully considered. Then finally, I would like to say that it is a huge challenge. It's not easy, all the plans that are in front of us, but it will be of great importance for the society as a whole, for the environment, for health. Yeah, so it's not easy, but we will have to continue on this path. And let me mention then one last element that we find very important, and that and in which we see a lot of potential. So like previous speakers, and that is the digital product passport. I think this will be an important tool for transparency reasons, for consumers, for the businesses involved, but also we think it could be a tool for stimulating high quality recycling. So on that note, I would like to stop and thank you again for letting me share these initial thoughts of the Netherlands regarding this important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for your reflections. And indeed, interesting views and comments we received, and also questions in the Q&A. And Florika, thank you also for addressing some of these questions. And it's, I guess now it's a bit of a race against time. Let's try to address as many questions as we can. And looking at the ones that are still there, I think it's good to also, there were questions regarding, let's say, the imports of products from other countries, from third countries, and looking at, and anyways, I have this kind of a question on the global aspects, the global impacts of the SPI. So if maybe you could say something more on that, how will this impact, let's say, specifically the imports of products from third countries? Are there any, say, safeguards to ensure that these products in a way will comply with these new eco-design requirements? But also more broadly, are there any, let's say, what are the considerations behind in terms of, well, can this cause a sort of a spillover, positive spillover effect on other countries to follow this this practice and maybe adopt similar rules as the EU is currently doing?
And with that, I can perhaps also reply to another question was on the chat. I tried my best to reply, but I will not manage whether food is included or not. Medicine, food, and now I forgot a third category will not be covered by these product requirements. So there are certain products which we left out, because we have more specialized legislation, especially on food and medicine, and it's much more complex. In general, as regards third countries, I mean, the idea is every product, whether it's produced inside or outside the EU, will have in the future to reply to specific product requirements and information requirements, label requirements. Now, clearly, this has to be notified to the WTO. And the framework as such is one thing. The more important part is, and there we need to be making very careful impact assessments on and getting data on trade flows and on origins and on the rest. When we go for specific product types or categories, because then you really need to look, where does it originate? How is it regulated inside? How it is regulated outside? And then, of course, it's a bit, I mean, the concept is not totally new. We had that for batteries. We had it for single-use plastic, and we had it now recently for deforestation. It's a commodity. But whether you look at a commodity or specific product, the idea is to go towards sustainability. Clearly, if we do so, we have to also make sure that not only inside, but also outside, producers are incentivized and also supported to go on a sustainable path. Personally, and that's my personal view, I think therefore also we have to green trade and trade rules, because if I would produce a product in a sustainable way and I'm outside, I will get probably zero tariffs in Europe, but not everywhere. And therefore, I think we need to get also premium for these products, and that can be done through WTO roads. But that is a side remark, and that is my personal remark. But in general, we will have to see how we can support. My information is, and I've spoken a lot to people, also just came back 3 weeks ago from Africa. This is a concept of circularity, which is not just a European concept. Latin America, Asia, and in Africa, you have wonderful, wonderful and very decisive pushes from not only industry, but also states in order to go to a circular approach on a lot of products, but also a lot of commodities. So it is a concept that is gaining traction everywhere. But we will, of course, have to also make sure that we, when we see the trade flows, that we support those. It's a bit the same like what we have proposed also under the deforestation proposal. But I really would like to, if you speak to certain Latin American countries, from Chile to Ecuador to others, or to African countries, you will hear Kenya, they just invest heavily in sustainability and circularity. So I think that we also should not forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and also for reflecting on other questions on other product categories like food, and packaging was one of them too, and also on the products that are already placed on the market. So to my understanding, this is something that is not currently in the scope, and the packaging directive will be addressing to some extent the question on the packaging. But
I mean,
this
packaging, I'm sorry that I interrupt, but packaging, we come out with a packaging waste review later, but this is a completely different strand. Here we talk about the product design, whereas in the the packaging waste directive, we will look at whether indeed recyclable or reuse and so on is the waste hierarchy will be promoted. So these are different things. But when I gave you the example of textiles, some requirements will come under the future specialized sustainability regulation that still have to become a sectoral, but other features can be already addressed under the Waste Framework Directive. So what do you do with the waste? How do you recycle? But also under the waste shipment regulation that we propose, that you cannot let's say, dump your textiles for incineration and landfill somewhere else. Why I'm saying this, giving this example, because it shows that we have a very coherent approach. We look at different existing legislation as well. This might come in, and therefore for me, packaging and packaging waste is a separate stream, but they are very linked also to the idea of sustainability and the SPI. And by the way, also green claims will also look at the same type of categories of products. So, sorry.
Thanks for clarifying this. Also, we had a number of questions that are that relate to, well, some of them are actually more specific about the extended producer responsibility, and to what extent this the new rules on eco design relate to these rules on the EPR, and there were also questions about the current waste legislation framework, the issue on let's say reuse targets versus recycling targets, and whether these waste legislation will be revised. And this is linked to the EPR because it is embedded in the waste framework legislation. Maybe if you have any reflections on these, how do these different policy I mean, not different agendas, but different policy legislations. How do they relate? How will they impact each other? And will there be need to revise other, let's say, other policy files building on the current work under the new eco-design/SPI?
I think I already reacted on the waste and on packaging, but I would like to pick up what Louise has said. What we're talking about here is making products sustainable, and sustainability of products as the norm in the future. And that can be addressed from different angles. The prime, let's say, game changer is now this legislation that sets out performance requirements and information requirements and labeling requirements. But it means we have to look holistically, and that's why I wanted to go back and to reassure Louise and Mrs. Bünemann to say that precisely this is now the approach under the European Green Deal, which still continues, and is actually, when you looked at the just the latest report on the that came out now on the situation on climate change and biodiversity loss, it will have to be pursued. And this is why this is really a mainstreamed agenda, and different parts of legislation from different DGs are coming together under the Green Deal and all look at sustainability. But here in this case, on the eco-design for sustainable products, we do work in any case together because we can't do it alone. Because it has an internal market aspect, we will have to look with DG Trade, INPA, and others on what will be, when we go to specific sectors, what will be the impact on third countries. So we will have to work with DG Connect on the passport, the digital product passport, and GSC to give us the data sets and so on. And the let's say the combinations are endless. But just to reassure, even in our own environmental legislation, as I tried to explain with the example of textiles, certain aspects are already covered by different legislation or can be improved through different legislation, and others will have to be set out in the specific legislation that comes per product category, on which we are not yet. We are only on the first step. I mean, the first step is the framework. And we still have to get it through in council and parliament in the trilogue.
Only that, yeah. Well, it's yes, it's understandably the focus is very much on the existing initiative, but we did have a number of questions on the when, and when it comes to the work program, and also the mandatory application of digital product passports and the new categories. When will this? Understandably, the work is currently focused on the existing proposal. But do you, maybe on top of what you said already, do you have any other, let's say, indications of any important dates? Doesn't have to be necessarily specific delegated acts, or it can be the discussions or anything that different stakeholders should be aware of, what comes next, and any interesting timeframes to consider for them to be involved and prepared.
I think one important piece of information is probably that when we put out last week the package, there was also a package from DG ENA on the work plan for the current eco-design directive. And that should not be underestimated. And I mean, I don't have it now in front of me, but but this is only for energy efficiency and reduction, very important in the current context. So therefore, please don't overlook that the current eco-design directive it will be rolled out, because they have set out a specific work plan, which will be going on until based on the trilogue and the negotiations and all of this, and which normally takes minimum 2 years, we will have the new eco-design for sustainable products regulation. That is a different, so we go for a regulation from directive to regulation. So in the meantime, this work plan from DG ENA for the eco-design directive continues, and it is a rollout. we will start negotiation, and we also go and prepare already some implementing rules on definitions, on other things, on how to implement better certain sustainability criteria. We will prepare that in the meantime, so that when we then have the legislation in place, that we have also the flanking, let's say, measures ready for industry. As regards the work plan for the specific legislation per product type, let's say ICT or something else, that is something which we are now starting to work. We have also a stakeholder forum that we can, eco-design stakeholder forum that we can use, but we now have to gather the data. And that means a lot of discussion with all types of stakeholders in order to understand what they really do, what they can do, what would be transposition. I mean, the usual better regulation work that we have to do. But it is complex because here, but it helps us now to look at what we need to do for these impact assessments, because the framework is set in the new legislation. So then we can target it. But if you go on, let's say, textile and furniture, or the matla and you know, your apparel, it's different than when I go to steel and aluminium. So I think there are very, very specific different assessments which have to be done, and we have to take that with a lot of care, including on the impact for third countries. And we will start now, of course, to identify that in order to be ready when the framework is up.
Yeah, and really a big diversity from these different products. And in one also case, it's more like intermediary. In another, as we talk about more finished products, it's really ambitious in that sense, and understandably a lot of work ahead. Yeah, we have less than 5 minutes left. I'm afraid that if we don't necessarily, if we open more questions, we will really go too much above the schedule. But I just wanted maybe to give, let's say, a bit of time for our respondents, like in one sentence, if each of you can maybe summarize your impression or some of your key messages before then we wrap up the discussion. Mari, maybe we can hear from you first.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the excellent discussion. So I just want to raise the importance of this initiative that was also published under the package, which is empowering consumers for the green transition. Because at least in the Nordic countries, we have seen that there is a huge movement among the citizens that they really want to do sustainable choices in their everyday lives. But if they lack information, it is very difficult for them to know what choice actually is sustainable or what product is sustainable. So this is of major importance.
Thank you so much, Marie. Louise, perhaps we can then hear also from you your key messages for takeaway.
Yes, thank you. I think my key message will be, since we all agree on the goals of making products more sustainable from industry sides, was let's do it in a workable way. Let's make it easy for everyone. That will push sustainability forward.
Thank you so much. And Barbara, also final words from your side on this discussion, this topic.
Thank you very much. Well, let's make sustainability the norm. We're on the good pathway. Will not be easy. And from a Dutch perspective, I would like to highlight that we would really like to see a very ambitious approach to the textile sector. And I think we can gain a lot there. And for the Netherlands, that would be really a focal point to try to make more sustainable, and also there the norm should be sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And indeed, I think we, in 1 hour, I think we managed to cover a number of topics of this when it comes to this very, very interesting, but also very comprehensive proposal. I think the proposal as such is a bit more than 100 pages long, just to just to indicate to those who want to start, who haven't started already going through it, plus the annexes. So it takes a bit of time, but I think this discussion was very useful also to actually to continue working on this. And of course, a lot of work to be done, because it covers a number of aspects, and it will have arguably very important impact on when it comes to our sustainability and our efforts to actually make our economy more competitive and just and also resilient. And indeed, happy to continue this discussion. I would really like to thank Ms. Florika, Fink-Hooijer for your reflections and presenting the SPI. And I would like to also thank Mari Pantsar, Louise Bünemann, and Barbara Rydbrook for your taking part in this discussion and your responses, and also thank the participants for their active involvement. And hopefully we managed to answer the most, as many questions as possible, the most relevant questions. But of course, this is not the end. This is just the beginning of the whole work on this file, and happy to continue discussion in our further events, and happy to have you then also join our future discussions. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. And also, good luck. Good luck with our further work on this, and happy to stay in touch. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody.